My name is Ada P. Lemos. I'm 31, and I work as a power plant operator at Average Power Station, the kind of place that never sleeps. The plant hums through the day and the night, turbines rolling behind concrete walls like distant thunder. I monitor systems, climb steel ladders slick with oil, and keep the current steady while most of the city is asleep. People at the station know me as the quiet one, the one who doesn't panic when alarms flash red. If something breaks, I fix it. If the grid stumbles, I keep it alive. It isn't glamorous, it's control. Machines listen when people don't. I live 15 minutes from the plant in a small apartment that smells like steel, detergent, and whatever I cooked the night before. One bedroom, one chair, clean counters, spotless floors. It's enough. The mortgage draft's on the first, the shelves hold tools instead of decorations, and the hum from the power lines outside my window keeps me company better than most people ever have. Every month I send money to my parents, just enough to cover whatever they claim needs paying. They never ask nicely, and they never say thank you. It's simply assumed. My mother calls it helping out, like I'm a daughter contributing to the family and not a private emergency fund they can tap without warning. My father, Ray, says almost nothing at all. Silence is his favorite way of reminding people he thinks he still runs the room. My sister Lena is the opposite. She talks too much, mostly online. She calls herself an entrepreneur and fills her pages with filtered photos from coffee shops and borrowed office spaces, captioning them like every project is on the edge of becoming a brand. Every launch, every lease, every box of supplies, I pay for it through transfers she never mentions. According to her feed, she built everything from scratch. According to my bank statements, she built it with my overtime. At the plant, Cal Bennett, the technician I work most shifts with, likes to rib me about it. "You keep half the city lit," he said one night while tightening a valve, "and your family still treats you like a backup generator." I smiled without looking up. "Someone's got to keep things running." Cal shook his head. "Ada, they'd go dark in a week without you." He wasn't wrong. When the city flickers during a storm, my phone rings before the monitoring system even finishes logging the fault. Everybody trusts I'll answer. That's what I do. Stay calm. Fix the problem. Move on. It's the same habit that kept me from arguing at home for years. Sometimes after night shift, I drive my old truck out past the edge of town, along the road that bends through muddy fields in winter. A few miles down sits the farmhouse where my parents live. Weathered siding, sagging porch, the one I rebuilt 3 years ago when the boards started to rot. I replaced the outside lights too. Strong LEDs, the kind that should last a decade. When I crest the hill, I can see them glowing warm yellow in the dark. That light hits me the same way every time. It feels like mine more than theirs, but they will never see it that way. Inside those walls, my father is probably watching the late news and grumbling about taxes. My mother is likely planning what to buy with next month's transfer. Lena is upstairs rehearsing another pitch video about her next big thing. That house runs smooth because I keep current flowing into it, but in their minds, I am still somehow the one who should be grateful. One morning, I pulled over near the old fence line and let the engine idle. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. The low buzz from the power line stretched across the fields, the same pulse I heard at work following me all the way home. Steady, mechanical, predictable, not like people. When I was a kid, I thought hard work earned respect. I thought if I fixed enough things, carried enough weight, made myself useful enough, I would eventually feel like I belonged. But years of sending money, patching roofs, and keeping quiet taught me something else. Some people take power for granted until it's gone. I turned the truck around and headed back toward the city. The farmhouse lights faded in the mirror until they became just another speck on the horizon. Back in the apartment, I hung my jacket on the same hook by the door, checked the meters, and listened to the hum through the walls. The plant's rhythm followed me here. It was comforting in a way family never had been. Machines don't lie. They don't perform affection while calculating what they can take from you next. Tomorrow would be another double shift. Cal would joke again that I was married to the grid. I would nod and keep working. That was the job. Make sure the current never stops, even when the people closest to you already have. They never said thank you. After a while, I stopped waiting to hear it. Thanksgiving was the only weekend off I had gotten in 3 months. I finished my Friday shift, cleaned up, and stopped by the bakery near the plant. I didn't bother cooking. No one at the farmhouse would notice the difference. The pie box sat on the passenger seat while I drove through the cold, back roads toward home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, every window was already lit. I could see movement inside, plates clinking, voices overlapping. I was late, but nobody had called to ask where I was. When I stepped in, they were already halfway through dinner. My mother looked up first, expression tight. "You finally made it," she said, setting her fork down. "We thought you got stuck at work again." "Shift ended early," I said, placing the pie on the counter. "I brought dessert." Dad didn't look up. He sat at the head of the table, carving what was left of the turkey while muttering at the television mounted on the wall. "World's full of lazy people," he said. "Nobody wants to earn anything anymore." "Your father's been watching the news again," Mom said with a nervous laugh. "You know how he gets." Lena leaned back in her chair, all bright energy that didn't belong in that house. "You should have seen the traffic at my new office this week," she said, scrolling through photos on her phone. "I met with a potential investor. Big name. I might get featured online." I took the empty seat across from her. "Which business is this one?" She rolled her eyes. "The wellness company, Ada. I told you about it." I remembered perfectly. She had already asked me twice to invest in it and called that helping family. Dad snorted. "Your sister's got vision. You could learn from that. You've been stuck in the same place for what, 10 years now?" "8," I said quietly. Mom smiled like she was trying to keep the peace. "Still, maybe your father has a point. You're smart, Ada. You could do something bigger than fixing machines." "I'm doing fine." The air thickened around the table. Forks scraped plates. Lena kept talking, showing us photos of an office that looked barely furnished. "It's small now," she said, "but we're expanding. I might hire staff by next quarter." Dad nodded proudly without even really looking at the screen. That's what ambition looks like. I stayed quiet and ate slowly. The house smelled like roasted vegetables and detergent. Every word around that table landed like a small hammer blow. Polite on the surface, meant to bruise underneath. Mom glanced at me again. "You look tired. You're not working nights again, are you?" "Most of them," she sighed. "That can't be good for you. You should think about settling down somewhere quieter." "I like the city." Dad grunted. "You like being alone. That's not the same thing." The words slid out of him with the ease of habit. I didn't respond. There was never any point. Dinner kept moving, a slow argument disguised as conversation. They asked questions they didn't care to hear answered. Lena talked over me. Mom smiled through every interruption. Dad lectured about people who waste their best years chasing paychecks. Then he put down his fork, cleared his throat, and said, "Your mother and I have made a decision about the family properties." Mom straightened, like she had memorized every beat of what was coming. "The house," Dad continued, "the land and the cabin up at Brook Lake. We're putting them under Lena's name. Papers were recorded last week." The room went still. I looked at him, then at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's fair," she said softly. "You have your job, your apartment, your own life. She needs help getting started." Lena smiled, small and smug. "It just makes sense. You don't even like being out here anyway." I stared at my plate. The turkey had gone cold. My reflection in the knife looked steady, but inside, something had gone silent. It felt like the half-second hush in the plant when a generator stalls before backup kicks in. Dad leaned back, satisfied. "Best to handle these things now instead of later. Fewer problems that way." Right," I said. My voice came out calm, almost detached. "Smart move." Lena laughed lightly. "Don't be weird about it, Ada. You've got your own place. I'm the one keeping the family legacy alive." I stood up slowly and pushed my chair back. "Thanks for the meal." Mom looked startled. "You're leaving already?" "I've got work in the morning." Dad frowned. "You can't stay an hour and be thankful?" I looked at him. "I am." I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside before anyone could say more. Behind me, I heard Mom call my name, then Lena's voice, sharp and mocking. She's always been dramatic. The door shut behind me. The air outside was cold and hard. The field stretched dark around the farmhouse, except for the warm light glowing behind the curtains, light I had paid to keep burning. I stood there for a moment with my hands in my pockets, watching my breath disappear into the night. Then I got into the truck and started the engine. The drive back to the city was quiet. No radio, no music, just the steady hum of the power lines tracing the road. My kind of company. By the time I reached the apartment, the pie was still sitting untouched in the passenger seat. I carried it upstairs and set it on the counter. I didn't feel angry, not yet. I felt something cleaner than that. Clarity. On Monday morning, I logged into my bank account and erased every payment link that tied me to my family. The confirmation screen stayed on my laptop for a few seconds after I canceled everything. Utilities, property taxes, insurance, every quiet little drain that had been siphoning money out of my account month after month without so much as a thank you. Gone. I stared at the screen, half expecting some final warning box to pop up and ask if I was sure I wanted to cut power to the people who had treated me like a permanent extension cord. It didn't. The page just refreshed and left me alone with the silence. And that silence felt louder than any alarm I had ever heard inside the plant. By Tuesday morning, my phone started buzzing before I even finished my coffee. I ignored the first few calls. Then the voicemails started coming in. My mother was first. Her voice shook in that careful, rehearsed way she used when she wanted to sound hurt before moving into accusation. "Ada, sweetheart, we noticed the payments didn't go through. Maybe it's a banking issue. Please call me back. This is tearing the family apart." I deleted it. The next voicemail was from Dad. No softness, just static and anger. "You think you can cut us off like we're strangers after everything we did for you? You selfish girl. Ungrateful." I deleted that one too. Then came Lena. Smooth, syrupy, pretending there wasn't a knife tucked under every sweet word. "Hey, Ada, just checking in. I know you're probably busy. By the way, I need a little bridge loan. Nothing huge. I'll pay it back soon, promise." She left the same message twice more that day, changing the reason each time. Once it was a delayed investor payment. Then it was a lease issue. Then it was payroll. Her stories shifted so fast they barely had time to put on makeup. By the end of the week, I had 27 missed calls and 9 voicemails. I answered none of them. I deleted every message one after another until the screen finally stayed quiet. Then I blocked all 3 numbers and set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. The next morning, the alarm at the plant went off at 5:30 sharp. Same as always. I walked in with my coffee, steel-toed boots still damp from the cold outside, and found Cal already leaning over a maintenance log with grease on his hands. He glanced up as I came through the control room door. "You look lighter," he said. "Something happened." I took a sip of coffee, fixed a few things. He watched me for a second, then grinned. "Feels like you finally cut a cord." Maybe I did. Cal didn't press. He never had to. That was one of the reasons I liked working with him. He understood the difference between curiosity and intrusion. We went back to work, and the turbine room swallowed the rest of the conversation. Loud, steady, dependable. The hum of the generators was the kind of sound you could lean on. It didn't care who was angry at you. It just kept going. That week, everything in my life felt cleaner. I stopped checking my phone at lunch. I slept straight through the night. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to messages asking for money, help, repairs, explanations, favors, or sacrifices disguised as love. My apartment stayed quiet, except for the soft buzz of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the windows. I started cooking again. Simple things: eggs with peppers, rice and chicken, soup on colder nights. Nothing fancy, just meals I made for myself because I wanted to eat, not because I was rushing between shifts or sending cash to somebody else's emergency. On nights off, I started taking apart old motors in the corner of my living room, salvage pieces from the scrap bin at the plant. I liked the order of it, the certainty. Every wire had a place. Every broken thing offered clues, if you knew how to read them. Machines didn't lie about what was wrong. They didn't pretend they were whole while draining you to keep themselves running. Sometimes, though, I caught myself wondering what was happening back at the farmhouse. Whether the power was still on, whether the bills were piling up on the counter, whether Lena's latest wellness business had already folded like wet cardboard. The thoughts didn't hurt the way they used to. They passed through like distant static, there and gone. Cal noticed the change in me before anyone else did. Not that I was talking more, I wasn't, but I moved differently, less braced, less like I was waiting for the next alarm to go off in my personal life before I could breathe. One night during graveyard shift, we were outside doing a systems check. The cold air carried the sound of the high voltage lines overhead, that endless low hum that never fully leaves your ears when you work around power long enough. Cal looked up and said, "You ever notice that sound never really stops? Even when the grid's down, there's always a little current left running somewhere." "Residual charge," I said. He nodded slowly. "Guess people are the same way. Takes a while to bleed out what's been running too long." I didn't answer, but I felt the words settle somewhere deep. Because he was right. Even after you cut power, something lingers. Not enough to keep the whole system alive. Just enough to remind you where the damage used to flow. Over the next month, life settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal in its simplicity. Work, sleep, cook, fix something old, repeat. Each day ran a little smoother than the last. I wasn't angry and I wasn't waiting for anything. I had just unplugged from the circuit that kept burning me. But the thing about shutting off power is that it doesn't stay still. Energy moves. Even when the current stops, there's always that faint pulse left behind waiting to discharge. That pulse stayed in me as a quiet curiosity about what would happen next. Not revenge, not hate. Just a simple question. What happens when people who have lived off your current realize the switch has flipped? I didn't have to wait long to find out, but not in the way I expected. It was close to midnight when my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a wrong number or a work call coming from some backup line. Then I saw the name attached to the call and froze for half a second. Clara Hastings, my mother's mother. I hadn't heard from my grandmother in months. When I answered, it wasn't her voice on the other end. It was a nurse. Calm, gentle, professional. She told me Clara was in hospice, not doing well, asking for me. I leaned against the kitchen counter while she spoke, staring at the dark window over the sink. The city lights outside looked blurred, as if the glass itself had started to breathe. I can come after my shift, I said. The nurse thanked me and gave me the room number. By the time I got to the hospice the next afternoon, the halls were quiet. The smell of antiseptic and something faintly sweet hung in the air. Her room light was dim, just one lamp glowing in the corner. Clara looked smaller than I remembered, pale skin against the blanket, her hands folded neatly as if she were conserving the last of her energy for something specific. But when I stepped inside, she opened her eyes and smiled. "You still keep your promises," she said softly. "I knew you'd come." I pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. "How are you feeling?" She smiled again, tired but sharp, like someone running out of charge. "But I needed to see you before I go." Something in the way she said it made the room feel suddenly smaller, heavier. I leaned forward slightly. "What is it, Grandma?" Her eyes stayed on mine, clearer than they had any right to be in a body that frail. And in that moment, before she even spoke again, I knew. Whatever she was about to say had been humming under my life for years. I just hadn't known where the sound was coming from. Clara watched me for a long moment before speaking again. Even in the dim hospice light, her eyes still carried that sharp, steady intelligence she had always had. Age had weakened her body, but not the way she looked at people. When she spoke next, her voice was soft but deliberate, like someone choosing each word with care. "You've always been the one who stayed steady," she said, "even when they made it hard." I didn't answer right away. I had learned years ago that if you gave people space, they eventually told you what they had been holding back. "You know who I mean," she added after a pause. "My parents," I said quietly. She nodded once. "You don't have to pretend with me, Ada." The room stayed silent for a few seconds, except for the slow beeping of the monitor beside her bed. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled softly across tile. Then Clara took a slow breath. "There's something I should have told you years ago." I leaned forward slightly in the chair. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. "You're not Ray's daughter." The words landed in the room like a switch snapping off. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. She kept talking before I could even process the first sentence. "Your mother had an affair before she married him," Clara said quietly. "She was young, scared, and when she found out she was pregnant, Ray agreed to marry her anyway." The silence stretched. "But he knew," she continued. "He knew from the beginning." I stared at the wall beside her bed, focusing on a faint crack in the paint, because my mind needed something simple to look at while everything rearranged itself. "That's why he's always treated you the way he has," she said gently. "You were a reminder of something he never forgave." The pieces of my childhood started sliding into place one after another. Ray's distance. The way he rarely spoke directly to me. The quiet resentment behind every lecture. The inheritance decision at Thanksgiving. The subtle line he had always drawn between Lena and me. "Did Mom ever tell you?" I asked. Clara shook her head slowly. She begged me not to say anything. She thought if she stayed quiet long enough, Ray would eventually let it go. But he never did. He just turned that anger toward you. My jaw tightened. So she let him. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. She convinced herself it was for the family's peace. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But peace built on lies doesn't last. She opened her eyes again and looked at me carefully. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." I shook my head slowly. "You don't need to apologize." The truth was strange. It didn't hurt the way I expected it to. Instead, it felt like a long mathematical equation, finally solving itself. All the numbers lined up. Every confusing piece of my childhood suddenly made sense. Clara's hand trembled as she reached for mine. "Promise me something," she said. I squeezed her hand gently. What? Don't carry their anger with you, she said softly. You've already done enough for people who only know how to take. I nodded. I promise. A faint smile crossed her face. Good girl. After a moment, she nodded weakly toward the nightstand beside her bed. Top drawer. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper written in her careful handwriting. If anyone argues later, she whispered, give that to Henry. It says what needs saying. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. That was the last real conversation we had. The next time I visited, Clara was sleeping. 2 days later, the nurse called again. She was gone. The funeral took place on a gray morning, with thin sunlight barely touching the fields. The cemetery was quiet, the wind moving through dry grass in slow waves. Only 2 people stood beside the grave, Uncle Henry and me. My parents didn't come. Mom sent flowers and a short message about not feeling well enough to travel. Lena posted a filtered photo online that morning about grief and family bonds. Henry stood beside me through the short service with his coat collar turned up against the wind. When it ended and the others drifted away, he stayed. She talked about you a lot, he said. I nodded. She didn't have to. Henry looked at the ground for a moment before continuing. You were the only one who kept showing up for her. We stood in silence for a few seconds. You worked harder than any of them, he added. Don't let their noise drown that out. I won't. Before leaving, I handed him the folded paper Clara had left. She told me to give this to you. He tucked it into his coat pocket without opening it. When Henry finally walked away, I stayed by the grave a few minutes longer. The wind moved quietly across the field. Clara had said something in the hospice room that stayed with me. Peace built on lies doesn't last. Standing there, the rest of my life started clicking into place like switches flipping in sequence. Ray's resentment. Mom's guilt. Lena's entitlement. All of it had been wired into the family system long before I was old enough to understand it. The drive back to the city felt different. The same road. The same empty fields. But the silence inside the truck wasn't hollow anymore. It hummed. Not with anger. With understanding. By the time I reached the city limits, I knew something for certain. My family had built their entire world on crossed wires, faulty connections, and hidden sparks. And all those years I had been the one trying to keep the system from burning down. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and exhaled slowly. The truth didn't fix anything, but it explained everything. And sometimes explanation is enough to finally stop trying to repair something that was never built correctly in the first place. A year passed after Clara's funeral. Life settled into a rhythm so quiet it almost felt unreal. The power station stayed the same, the way places like that always do. Machines don't carry grudges, don't play favorites, don't pretend affection while waiting for the next opportunity to drain you dry. They just run, and I liked that. Most days followed the same pattern. 14-hour shifts, the deep rumble of turbines vibrating through concrete floors, the steady glow of control panels lighting the dark control room. I would drive home late, clothes smelling like oil and metal dust, shower, sleep, and start again before sunrise. Predictable, stable, clean. That night started the same as any other. I pulled into my apartment parking lot just after midnight, the engine of my truck rattling softly as it cooled. For a second, I thought I had parked in the wrong building. 3 figures stood under the streetlight beside the entrance, surrounded by luggage. Then I recognized them. My mother, Ray, and Lena. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically smaller exactly, but diminished somehow, like the years had finally started pressing down on them. Mom spotted my headlights and waved immediately. Ada, thank God you're home. I didn't get out of the truck right away. I just sat there with the engine idling, headlights washing over the 3 of them and the pile of suitcases at their feet. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. Finally, I killed the engine and stepped out. Mom rushed toward me first, already halfway into tears. The house needs repairs, she said quickly. The plumbing is ruined. Contractors messed everything up. Dad folded his arms behind her. A bunch of crooks, he muttered, calling themselves professionals, total disaster. Lena sighed dramatically. We've been driving all day, she said, scrolling through her phone like she was bored. We just need somewhere to stay until everything's fixed. I looked down at the luggage again. 2 suitcases each, a cooler, a blanket roll. Temporary visits don't look like that. For almost a minute, I didn't say anything. I just stood there with my arms folded, letting the silence stretch until they started shifting uncomfortably. Then I spoke. 1 week, I said. Mom exhaled with visible relief. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. We knew you'd understand. Dad nodded like he had expected nothing less. Family sticks together. Lena smirked. I told you she'd cave. Inside, things changed faster than I expected. Within an hour, the apartment no longer felt like mine. Mom unpacked boxes and started rearranging my kitchen cabinets, complaining that I didn't have proper storage. Dad claimed the couch immediately, flipping on the television and criticizing every piece of furniture I owned. "You make decent money," he grumbled. "You couldn't afford something better than this?" Lena took over my desk. She opened my laptop and started typing. "Just some work emails," she said casually. "Don't worry, I'll log out." She didn't. By the next morning, the apartment felt smaller. The air smelled like my mother's perfume and my father's cologne. My refrigerator had been reorganized. The cabinets shifted. A handwritten grocery list appeared taped to the fridge in my mother's neat handwriting. "Groceries we need." Underneath it were brands I never bought. At work the next day, Cal noticed immediately. "You look tense," he said while we checked a maintenance log. "Oh, got company." "Friends?" "Family." He grimaced. "You letting them stay?" "For now." That night after work, I stopped at a hardware store before heading home. I bought a small apartment camera. Nothing expensive. The kind designed to sit unnoticed near a smoke detector. When I got back to the apartment, I mounted it on the wall near the ceiling. Mom saw me installing it. "What's that for?" she asked. "Security." She shrugged. "Good idea." She had no idea. Later that night, I disabled the camera's status light and hid the feed behind a calculator icon in the app. No one noticed. Over the next few days, the footage filled up quickly. Mom opened my mail and read it before placing it back on the counter. Dad called relatives on speakerphone, complaining that I owed them gratitude for raising such a difficult daughter. Lena stayed up late at my desk printing documents. Business loan applications, with my name on the signature line. Forged. She didn't even bother hiding it. I watched everything in crisp resolution, and I said nothing. By the third day, they had completely taken over. Mom replaced my towels because yours are too rough. Dad adjusted the thermostat every few hours. Lena invited one of her friends over and gave them a tour of the apartment like it belonged to her. When I came home that evening, they were sitting on my couch eating takeout and watching television, like they had always lived there. That night, I downloaded every clip from the camera, organized them by date. Then I copied everything onto a flash drive. Across the label, I wrote one word: proof. The next morning before work, I locked it inside my locker at the power station. Hard copy, in case the cloud failed. A few days later, Cal stopped by the apartment to return a wrench he had borrowed from my truck. The moment he stepped inside, he paused. Boxes everywhere. Shoes piled by the door. My mother humming in the kitchen while reorganizing my spice rack. Dad asleep on the couch with his boots still on. Lena pacing the hallway on speakerphone complaining about deadlines. Cal leaned toward me quietly. "Yeah, you weren't kidding." No." He glanced around again. "You letting them live here?" "Just long enough." "For what?" I didn't answer, but he already understood. He nodded slowly, handed me the wrench, and left. That night, I sat at the kitchen table watching the camera feed through a small window on my phone. The television noise. The refrigerator hum. Lena's voice drifting down the hallway. For years, I had been their power source. Now I was simply recording how they used it. The week stretched on like a shift that refused to end. By Friday, my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. Their voices filled every corner of it. My mother had unpacked boxes I hadn't even realized she brought. Dad treated the couch like it had always belonged to him. Boots up, remote in hand, issuing commentary about everything I owned. Lena had turned my kitchen table into her office, laptop open, papers spread across the surface like she was running a company out of my living room. Mom caught me heading out for work that morning. "Ada," she said, holding out her hand, "I need a copy of your keys." I paused by the door. "For emergencies." "What kind of emergencies?" I asked. "You never know," she replied. "What if we get locked out?" "I'll risk it." She frowned. "You don't trust your own mother?" I didn't answer. She took the silence as confirmation. From the couch, Dad called out, "We've been talking about expenses." I turned toward him. "Groceries, gas, all that," he continued. "You should start covering more since we're between places." "You mean since you're living in mine?" His head snapped up. Don't take that tone with me. Family helps family." "Yeah," I said quietly. "They do." Lena walked in just then, phone pressed to her ear. "Oh, don't mind her," she said to whoever was on the line. "My sister's just grumpy from work. I've been helping her get organized since we moved in." She winked at me like it was some private joke. I went to my room without another word. That night, we ate dinner together. Mom talked about redecorating the apartment. Dad complained about the street noise. Lena scrolled through messages while bragging about a business deal that was supposedly closing soon. I listened quietly, nodding when I had to. "Ada," Mom said suddenly, breaking the silence, "you should really think about upgrading your place." I looked up. And maybe move to a house somewhere, she continued, with space for all of us. Dad chuckled. Don't put ideas in her head. She can barely manage this apartment. Lena laughed. She'll figure it out once she starts listening to me. I smiled faintly. You're probably right. They didn't notice the tone. They never did. After dinner, I went to my room and opened my laptop. I uploaded every clip from the camera and every document Lena had printed using my name. Then I attached the files to an email addressed to Uncle Henry. The subject line was simple. Hold this. No explanation. No message. Just the files. When the upload finished, I closed the laptop and leaned back in the chair. The hum of the power lines outside drifted through the thin apartment walls. I had heard that sound every day of my life. Steady, precise, honest. Unlike them, the next morning I made a call to a real estate contact who occasionally handled private sales for plant employees. I need to sell quickly, I told him. Within a few hours, he found a buyer. A logistics company looking for staff housing. Closing scheduled midweek. The rest of the weekend passed quietly. Mom filled the fridge with food I never ate. Dad adjusted the thermostat repeatedly. Lena spent hours talking on speakerphone about her expanding company. I watched everything like someone monitoring a control panel waiting for a system to overload. On Sunday night, I came home and found them watching a movie together. Mom had made popcorn. Dad's boots were resting on my coffee table. Lena was painting her nails on the armrest. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. We were thinking we might stay a few more weeks, Mom said when she saw me. I nodded. Sure. Her face lit up. Really? Of course. Lena laughed. Told you she'd come around. I went into my bedroom and started packing. 2 duffel bags, 1 toolbox. Efficient. Quiet. No wasted motion. Early the next morning, before dawn, I carried the bags downstairs and loaded them into my truck. The city was still dark. Inside the apartment, everything was silent. My family slept, unaware. I walked through each room once. The kitchen smelled like coffee and dish soap. The living room was cluttered with their things. Shoes, jackets, half-empty mugs. I didn't touch any of it. I placed my keys on the kitchen counter. Then I opened the breaker panel near the hallway. I flipped the unit's main switch. The lights blinked once, then went out. The refrigerator clicked off. The low hum that had filled the apartment every day vanished instantly. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the absolute silence. Then I walked out. The sky outside was turning gray. I climbed into the truck and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the building stood behind me, one dark square in a row of glowing apartments. Some power cuts aren't accidents. By sunrise, I was already on the highway. The sky stretched pale gray over the fields, while the truck rattled along the empty road. Boxes shifted quietly in the back. My old apartment, the one my family had taken over like it was theirs, disappeared somewhere behind me in the distance. I didn't look back. When I reached the power station, the routine felt almost comforting. I parked in the gravel lot, walked through the security gate, and stepped into the locker room. Shower, uniform, steel-toed boots. By the time the turbines came online for the morning shift, I was already moving through the control room like nothing had changed. Panels glowing green. Pressure gauges steady. No alarms. Just calm. But every few hours I checked my phone. Waiting. Not nervously. Just waiting. By Wednesday morning around 9 o'clock, the notification finally appeared. Police called to remove trespassers from downtown apartment. The attached photo was unmistakable. My building. I opened the article. The new owners had arrived with the deed, closing documents, and the no occupancy affidavit I had signed during the sale. When my family refused to leave, the police treated the situation as trespassing, not a tenant dispute. The video attached to the article told the rest of the story. Mom's voice echoed through the hallway, high and frantic. You can't do this. Our daughter tricked us. Dad stood behind her, shouting at the officers, fists clenched. Yeah, this is illegal. She sold our home out from under us. Lena appeared a moment later, holding her phone up to record herself crying. She kicked us out with nowhere to go, she said into the camera. She's jealous of me. She's always hated me. The officers remained calm. They explained the property had been legally sold and the occupants had no legal claim to remain there. But logic meant nothing to people who had spent years living inside their own illusions. By noon, the footage had spread across social media. Different angles, different captions. Neighbors had recorded everything from their doorways while my parents argued with the police. The internet responded exactly the way the internet always does. Brutally. They lived off her and now they're mad she moved on. Classic parasites. Imagine screaming at the police because you can't freeload anymore. By mid-afternoon, the situation escalated even further. Uncle Henry decided the timing was right. He uploaded every file I had sent him. The videos from the hidden apartment camera, Lena's forged loan applications, audio recordings of my parents talking about how I owed them for raising me, and finally, Clara's handwritten note confirming the truth about my paternity. The internet didn't hesitate. Clips of Lena bragging about her entrepreneur career started circulating alongside the footage of her being escorted out of the building by police. People dug up her old business posts and compared them to the documents showing she had tried to take out a loan using my name. One user even discovered her so-called wellness company website was copied directly from another brand's template. Within hours, the original company issued a public statement denying any connection. Then attention shifted to Dad. Someone uploaded a close-up video of him yelling at the officers in the hallway, face red, voice shaking with rage. The comments beneath it were merciless. That man hasn't worked a real day in years. That's the guy calling his daughter selfish? He's lucky she didn't press charges. Mom didn't escape criticism either. Screenshots from the camera footage showing her opening my mail and searching through my drawers spread quickly. People called her manipulative, delusional, cruel. Within 24 hours, the entire story had spread through local forums and social feeds. The Lemos family had become a cautionary tale people shared for entertainment. By the following Tuesday, the consequences had begun stacking up. Dad lost his contractor job after showing up to work furious about the viral videos and accusing everyone of conspiring against him. Mom started emailing relatives asking for help. Most didn't respond. Lena's investors vanished immediately. Her business accounts disappeared one by one. Her website went offline. Her social media profiles were wiped clean. A week later, someone posted that she had been spotted working a receptionist desk under a different name. Mom eventually rented a small place outside the city, using money from selling whatever furniture they had left. Dad moved in with a cousin. The family scattered. Meanwhile, at the power station, life stayed exactly the same. The turbines kept spinning. The grid stayed steady. The story eventually reached a few coworkers, but no one made a spectacle of it. At most, I got a quiet nod or a small look of respect when people passed through the control room. One night during shift change, Cal leaned against the railing and smirked. "You see the news this week?" I kept my eyes on the gauges. "I might have." He chuckled. "Looks like you finally flipped the switch." I nodded once. "Guess I did." Later that night, I walked the perimeter fence during routine inspection. The city stretched out below the station, thousands of lights glowing in ordered lines, every one of them powered by the systems humming behind me. Rain had passed earlier, leaving the air cool and clean. I stopped beside the main transformer and felt the steady vibration under my boots. Clara's words drifted through my mind again. Peace built on lies doesn't last. She had been right. Their lies had burned out on their own. All I had done was step back and let the system overload. Before leaving the plant that night, I checked my phone one last time. 3 new messages from unknown numbers. Probably Mom. Maybe Lena. I deleted them without opening any. When I reached my new apartment later that morning, the place smelled like fresh paint. New furniture, new locks. No perfume, no shouting, no borrowed voices filling the walls. For once, I didn't turn on the lights. I liked the quiet. At dawn, I drove back to the plant and parked outside the gate, watching the city wake up. One district at a time, the power grid came alive, lights blinking on in perfect sequence. That's the thing I've always liked about electricity. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't pick favorites. It simply runs where it's supposed to. And when you cut the wrong line, the rest of the system keeps working just fine. For years, my family drained every ounce of power I had. Now they were out there somewhere in the dark, learning what silence feels like. I took one last breath of cold morning air and headed toward the turbines beginning their daily restart. The city glowed steady and alive behind me. I didn't shut their power down. I just stopped keeping them plugged in.